This episode of the Good Food CFO podcast is sponsored by Settle. You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan, joined as always by our producer, Chelsea Steer.
Hey, Sarah, and hey, listeners, welcome back to another episode. Listen, if you haven't had a chance to rate or review the podcast wherever you're listening, take a moment, do that right now. That way we have an opportunity to reach more listeners all over the country and the world, actually. And don't forget, it is the end of January and we are still trying to get to 300 subscribers. So if you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button down below. And don't forget to turn on notifications so that you get updated anytime we post new content, because Sarah, we've got some really fun stuff coming up.
I agree.
Okay. So Sarah, today in our main episode, you are going to be talking to Bill Brinkerhoff. And he is the co-founder of a company that we featured here on the podcast back in October in a news segment.
Yes. So Bill is the co-founder of Argus Farm Stop in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And hopefully that sounds familiar to many of you. We mentioned Argus at the end of the Siete Foods acquisition episode, and we actually heard from some folks in our hello@thegoodfoodcfo.com inbox. You can email us there at any time saying things like, I'm dying to know more about that company that you mentioned at the end of the episode. And at that point in time, I was excited. I was replying to people saying, well, you're in luck. We have a news story for you. But in addition to putting together that news story, Chelsea, you also put on your producer hat. You reached out to Bill and you secured him as a podcast guest. And he was beyond lovely to sit down and talk to. And for those listening, in case you missed the news story, I'll give you a little bit of a background on Bill and Argus. So Bill, along with his wife, Kathy Sample, are the co-founders of Argus Farm Stop, which is a new model farmers market designed to grow the local food economy. And you know we love that. It was started, quite honestly, as an experiment to see if a new model of a traditional farmers market would work, both for the farmers and the consumers. Bill shares in the episode how he and his wife were subscribers to CSAs for years, and they saw a similar model to Argus in another city and wanted to give it a try back at home, back in Ann Arbor. And they believed that this re-envisioned retail connection between small farms and consumers could be the key to growing local food systems. It has been. Since its inception in 2014, Argus has paid over $22 million to local farms and producers from 2 small store locations. And Bill is sharing the full story of how Argus came to be, how they have grown, and what they're doing to help other communities and founders, build farm stops and similar models where they live in and around the country. So I'm super excited for folks to hear this episode.
Yeah, I would say that it does sound like that experiment worked.
Yes.
Well, I'm also really excited for folks to hear this conversation. As you mentioned, Sarah, I reached out, I got it all together. So I loved hearing the conversation the first time around. I can't wait to listen to it again.
Yeah.
But before we get into that,
yeah,
I know you're really excited to share a little news here.
Yeah.
And we actually shared this in our newsletter last week.
Mm-hmm.
We just released our 2024 impact report.
Yeah, our first ever impact report. It's something that Chelsea, you and I have talked about doing for I'll say a couple of months, if not sort of periodically throughout 2024, just really saying to ourselves, we're so grateful for the Baba Yacht members and for our listeners of the podcast and for folks who are purchasing tools and coaching on our website. And we really want to let folks know what impact they are having on our ability to create this show, to continue to offer free and low cost resources. Our hope is to never raise a price on our website for any of the tools that we offer. And in fact, we hope to lower costs and prices on some things, to make them even more accessible. And so in our first ever impact report, we talk about what we were able to achieve in 2024 as a brand of the Good Food CFO, sort of beyond the podcast, and how our Baba Yacht members and folks who made purchases and who joined us in office hours financially impacted our abilities and what you all made possible this year. And one thing I can't stress enough is this energetic exchange in what we do. The energetic exchange here on the podcast is like, I love to do this. I know that you do too, Chelsea, and we want to put out really good content, and we just want people to take it in. And every once in a while, if you rate or review or send us a note, that's all we need. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just let us know you're listening. Let us know you're finding value, and you know, and how we can provide more value to you.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to, Baba Yacht memberships, we've got, features and benefits there, for that energetic exchange. And then for courses and coaching, same thing. Like, we built those tools and created coaching sessions. So talking about our CFO office hours, to help founders and to do it in a way that was as affordable as possible. And in exchange for that support and help that we hope we're giving, founders, you're reciprocating by contributing to our ability to make the show and to keep the website running and all of that. So it feels really symbiotic, I think is the word. And we just wanted to make sure that we were communicating our gratitude and just really the impact that everybody has had on what we're able to do and what we want to do in the future. So I'm really excited that it's out in the world. Can you let folks know, Chelsea, where they can find it?
Yeah. So if you are on our email list, you actually have a copy of it. You got it last week. So make sure that you check that out if you haven't yet. And if you are not on our email list yet, I suggest you sign up because we've got some good info coming out in those emails. But also, you can go to our Baba Yacht page on the website. You can go to thegoodfoodcfo.com/Baba Yacht, or just go to our homepage and click on Baba Yacht in the top right corner, and you will find it there as well.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you for that time to share about our impact report. I hope that you will check it out. But without further ado, let's hear my convo with Bill.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Good food founders, let's talk about cash flow, the metric that truly determines your ability to grow your business. We all know that figuring out your true costs, your margins, and projecting cash flow isn't always as straightforward as it could be. When your data is scattered across systems, it is easy to lose track and leave money on the table. That's where Settle comes in. Settle is the only platform built for CPG brands that combines inventory, payments, and procurement into one unified system. And they offer integrated financing for your invoices to help extend your cash runway. Settle helps you make smarter decisions and keeps your business on track to grow sustainably. Head over to settle.com/goodfood to learn how brands like Carnivore Snacks use Settle to manage their cash flow and growth. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your interest in hearing more about the Farm Stop story.
Yeah. And I'll say it's not just me. So our producer, Chelsea, who I know you've been emailing with, and she speaks very highly of you, by the way, from your email communications to date. We did a news segment in one of our podcast episodes last season. I think Civil Eats did an article on Farm Stop. So you guys were mentioned in it. We shared a little bit about it because we loved the story. And people actually wrote in and said, we want to know more about that business. We want to know more about that model. So I'm very excited that you agreed to come and talk with me today, because I'm super interested in learning more and going deeper into the story with you, but so are our listeners who are, in case you're not like fully informed on the Good Food CFO podcast, they're all mission-driven businesses. They're primarily sourcing highest quality ingredients from local sustainable farms whenever they can. And, they're trying to create a better food system from beginning to end. And you've done that with your Farm Stops. So if I might, I'd like to just kind of start at the beginning with the question, where did the idea for the Farm Stop originate, and how did you go about launching your first location?
Sure. So it started a little bit more than 10 years ago. We are actually visiting Worcester, Ohio, to drop our middle son off at the College of Worcester. And we wandered into a store called Local Roots that is exactly the model that we've built, and we've stayed in touch with them ever since. But in this store, just in the middle of a weekday, met the farmer dropping off eggs. And, he said, I have my chicks in the car. They just came in the mail. And it's like, what? They mail chicks in the mail? He said, yep, that's how they come. And so we had this great conversation, and we were there several weeks later. And so we got to go back to that store. That was really interesting. And, that time the blueberry farmer was in, and, she was explaining the difference between the first pick blueberries, which are awesome, and the subsequent picks are really good, but also, different uses for them. And what was remarkable for us was that we suddenly felt like more a part of this local food community, just being these outsiders, because the model they had set up was so accessible and so convenient and everyday. And we found that store was started by a 28-year-old,
Wow.
Jessica Eichelberry, who was just found it too hard to shop local. She was trying to do an all local Thanksgiving dinner and had to go to 6 different farms and get all the stuff pulled together. And she just thought it had to be easier. And so we spent time shadowing with them and learning more about it. And we really, at that point, had no intention to open our own store. It was, we came back to Ann Arbor and we said, this is something that's dramatic. Like, this really needs to be in our town. And we had 100 conversations. We talked to everybody about this model, including our farmers market, and they were understood completely how important it would be to have sustainable incomes for farmers. And we'll get into more what the model is in a little bit, but it was just, support from the farmers market. We talked to Whole Foods at that time, was doing more local. They said this would be great in our town, and and you guys should do it. We can't do it, but you should do it. And so, one thing led to another, and we signed a lease and we opened the store the following August. So it was
Wow.
a dramatic year.
Yeah. And you did not have experience in the food industry prior to embarking on this business, did you?
My wife and I met in business school in Ann Arbor, and we lived away for 12 years, and we came back to town. So we had some business experience, but we hadn't really worked in the retail end since college days. So we had a little bit of that background. We also, like in the food world, we always loved local food. We always dragged our kids to the farmers markets, wherever we traveled, to see how local food was done, in that part of the country or world. And we were the distribution point for the Purple Dragon Food Co-op in New Jersey when we lived out there.
Okay.
We were involved, but it was things that we loved to do, but it was never the main thing that we could do. And so that's kind of where, we just made a career decision to do something together and to do something that benefited local. But we really weren't sure what that was going to be until we walked into Local Roots that day.
Wow. Okay. So part of my backstory is that when I got very into local food, long story short, I got the opportunity to open a retail store, not the farm stop model exactly, but we were going to be sourcing from, local farmers and dairies and ranchers and fishers. And when we went to sign the lease, I mean, we had worked for months. There was back and forth talking. We did all of our research. We knew who was going to be in the store. We had the seasonal charts, the whole deal. And we went to sign the lease, and they basically said, you can sell produce and only produce. And for us, we were like, there's not enough of a margin that would ever make this make sense. And the way that they had structured the lease was just really not in our favor. And I remember saying, okay, we can't sign this today. We'll get back to you. And so we got in our cars, my partner and I drove away and got on the phone with one another and said, I can't believe this, but we both know that we can't do this. This won't work this way. What did you have a special kind of lease? Was it a unique location? Like, because as part of me thinks, like, how is it possible, that this could work? So just kind of share a little bit, if you can, about that situation.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I think, what it's like, I agree. It's challenging if you were to only do produce, and, like my wife says, like, no one wants to go to the lettuce store. It's just like, you need a place that fits into the way people shop, and they really are busy. And so that's like the biggest, kind of irony that, people value local food so much, and then we turn around and make it so difficult to buy it for both the farmers and customers. But you have to be, at a farmer's market that's only open one day a week. And, in the winter, it's really hard here in Michigan, or you do a
Oh, I bet.
CSA and it's a special box, and it's not, everything you need. Then you have to go to other stores to get all the other stuff you need. And so the whole goal, I think, with Farm Stops is to offer everything that a food shed can produce locally, and it's exclusively locally in that store. So with one stop, you can really buy all your produce, all your meats, dairy, and grocery items, and you can
Yeah.
be assured that it's locally sourced, and that the farmers are getting like the highest margins they can get. Like, it's a farmer driven enterprise. So we were looking for locations in Ann Arbor, and we happened upon an abandoned dispensary that used to
Okay.
be a gas station, that was derelict, and it was not listed for sale, but it was exactly in a beautiful part that was the connecting point between the residential part of Ann Arbor and the downtown. And as we
Okay.
parked in that parking lot, we just sat there, and it was kind of wintry, but we still saw like people that looked like they might cook, going back and forth. Like they might, it was like there's parts of Ann Arbor that are really student oriented, and we'll get to that later. But this was like a
Okay.
real part where we thought it could work. And it turned out that the landlord had wanted to do, the owner of the building, as we found a way to meet him, was interested in this, and was interested in saving the building and resurrecting it to a
Mm,
higher purpose. And so we've had a great relationship with that building owner, and we've worked with them on subsequent ones. But it was good fortune. And these are tiny places. These are the kind of buildings that are all across America.
hmm
It's the little gas station that used to be in town with the two garage doors that go up. And
Yeah.
it's really, it's like 2,000 square feet is enough to sell everything you need to sell to have a
Wow.
complete market. And so that's what we ended up signing a lease on.
Wow. Okay. I have to ask a couple of questions here. I
Yeah.
mean, when you think about 2,000 square feet compared to a massive grocery store, right? Just your sort of run of the mill Kroger or whatever. What immediately happens in my mind is, wow, that's quite a size difference. But then what happens is I pluck out the middle where all the overly processed food is, and you go, actually, 2,000 square feet, it's a plentiful amount of space, to fill with really good food, and perhaps you have even more of it than what I'm going to call a traditional grocery store has these days. It's very cool to think about. Does that 2,000 square feet include any? I'm assuming like some storage, refrigeration,
Yeah.
things like that, or is it all retail space?
The actual store itself is about 1,300 square feet. We built on another 600 square feet of a greenhouse,
Oh,
because we
cool.
also have cafe and coffee offerings. And so it's really it's a market plus a pretty decent coffee shop, which builds to community. And I can say all
Yeah.
farms making deliveries get free coffee. They get free coffee whenever they're in town. They're like, it's their place in town.
Yeah.
The farms are rock stars when they come into the farm stop. That kind of building works because there tends to be lots of outdoor space, so you can expand outdoors seasonally, and you also need space kind of behind it for storage. So it's not
Yeah.
these are about a tenth of the size of a normal grocery store. They're doable, like for an individual, or a small group who wants to embark on it. The produce farms really need to be there twice a week to
Okay.
participate in the model. They deliver, really, they all still go to the farmers markets, and they also then double or triple what they bring into town, and they load us up. And then if it's a rain day, they load us up double. And all the customers who didn't visit them on Saturday come and shop from us on Sunday or Monday. There's display storage in the store, like, for example, like these produce decks that are gorgeous, these that have the misting systems that turn on
Yeah.
every 15 minutes. Why should those be reserved just for, industrial food? And so, could you have these farmers working at farmers markets have to hand mist everything. They make it look gorgeous, but they're
hmm
really doing huge amounts of work to make that produce look good and stay good. So, our hope was we could have a produce deck exclusively stocked with what's coming out of local farms that week, that day, and look great. It's the work of art. It's the centerpiece of each of our stores. When you come and you see that, the first thing you see is this giant produce deck that year round is full of things. Even in winter in Michigan, it's full of spinach and other things coming in. But then there's an equal amount of some storage space, like a walk-in behind the store. So the farms come and make deliveries. they drop their stuff off in sale ready condition. They can go back and farm is the
Right.
concept. And then our staff takes it and stocks it and restocks it and represents the farm as best as we
Yeah.
can.
So getting into the model, I read, I think it was in your bio, that over 10 years, $22 million has come through the farm shop and landed directly in farmers' hands. Like $2.2 million a year. That is, first of all, amazing. Congratulations and thank you. I think that when someone thinks of something like a farm stop, maybe pictures it in their head. I don't think that the dollar amount that correlates with that is $2.2 million a year. And that's like for folks who maybe didn't hear the news segment that we did, that's about 70%, right, of the total revenue that's generated at the farm stop. It goes directly to the farmers and they get to set the price of their products in the store. That is not something that you and your team do on their behalf. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's right. It's really it's powerful when you have a year-round market that's exclusively local. It really speaks to customers who want to buy from local farms but are just too busy. Like they miss the farmers
Yeah.
market. There's never been a
Yeah.
good plan B, or for whatever reason they've not been able to patronize it. And that's the customers that really come and shop first, from what's in season at our store. They know the economics are sustainable. The food is amazing. And also, it didn't start that way. I guess I wouldn't want to scare people
Oh,
off. Like
sure.
in Worcester, their annual sales at that time were like 600,000 or 700,000 a year, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a lot, but if you're open every day, I mean, it doesn't equate to a lot. So it does add up when you're open, continuously. And
Right.
even the farm stop model works at that level. We were prepared to operate at that level, but really quickly, this was popular with customers and popular with farms. And so the
Yeah.
sales have come in, but you don't need to open 3 store, it can work as a single
Yeah.
store operation for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to go back to sort of the beginning here. So you've found this building, this old gas station. The owner of the building is into the idea. They seem motivated to help you bring the building back to life and to it sounds like kind of support your idea and the building of community there. What are you guys thinking at the beginning? Was it always that 70-30 split? Did you have a bunch of farmers that you had kind of locked in so you knew this could work? Tell us a little bit about the early days and what the model looked like in
Yeah.
the beginning, because I know it doesn't always stay the same
Yeah.
from
Right. No, no.
pre-launch to post-launch.
Yeah. I know looking backwards, it always looks really smart, but when you're actually going through it, there's some twists and turns. And so I'll start just talking with these 100 conversations that we had when we came back
Yeah.
from Worcester and we started talking to farmers at the farmers market. And we would ask them if we could talk to them about an idea that we would like to bring to town. And we would see if we could go visit their farm. We didn't want to bother them at the farmers market. And
Yeah.
so we had a series of discussions and we kind of started with the more influential farms that, if they were agreeing to it, I think others would follow. And it wasn't like immediate for sure that they were thinking this is a great idea, because technically what we're describing here is consignment. Like the farmers
Yeah.
own their goods and they set their prices. And the farmers normally get the short end of the stick on consignment deals where they're then at risk of all the loss. And so it's normally been used as a risk shifting paradigm. And so we for sure could have just bought the food and put it in the store and operated normally like that. But we really wanted nothing to do with that. We wanted to break the traditional paradigm where you just pay the farmer and negotiate them down to as low a price as they'll take, and then you turn around and mark it up as high as you can. Like
Yeah.
we didn't want anything to do with that. Like it's what we wanted to do instead was have the farms be able to control their commercial terms, how they wanted to sell it, and then have a sign over the cash register that just says the farms take 70% of sales. So if something costs $5, customer knows $3.50 is going to that farm, and $1.50 is what is keeping the store open year round every day. And that Argus is a mission directed LLC. So we use business approaches, but we don't we pay staff and rent and expenses, but it's not like a a business where we're looking to make money on the backs of these farmers.
Right.
We can pay ourselves to run the business, but it's not it's not a private equity operation of any kind.
Yeah.
So it's a farmer equity operation. So we actually started, Local Roots was at 90%. They're a farmer owned cooperative.
Okay.
And they were operating with all volunteers, and they're, as a cooperative, they had complex governance, and Jessica warned us a little bit, just try to keep things simple in that regard. So we ended up pursuing an L3C to establish this, which is a low profit limited liability company. It's a mission directed LLC, where our main goal in our articles is to grow the local food system. And we started to pay the farms 80%. When we ran our numbers, we thought, well, 80% we might be able to do. And we did it. We were just barely breaking even for these first few years, paying 80%, but it required perfect execution and no equipment
Mm.
breakdown. And then it's not really comfortable to be operating on that margin that's so negative potentially, or thin. And so we had conversations with farms over the years, and we've changed that sharing. We look at it each year. We've changed it twice over 10 years, once to 75-25 and then to 70-30. And I would think 70-30 is the way to go. Each time our farms encouraged us to do whatever you need to do, just don't go out of business. Like, we do not want to
Yeah.
read that you are going out of business. So we were able to move, that sharing, to keep operating. But anyways, so the farmer discussions, we eventually, I guess, when you think about everything you need for a store, we kind of wanted to have a full complement of goods. And so we started with 40 farms and producers that filled the store with at least one of everything. And so that was enough for opening day.
Wow. That's amazing. Did you have the cafe from the beginning, or was that something that came to be after some time?
When we ran the financials first, and we were going to pay out 80% to the farms, it became kind of clear that you needed something to help support financially this operation. And this idea, in Worcester, they actually have a cafe that makes lunches and things out of local food. And so we were thinking originally about a cafe plus a farm stop, but we just didn't have the space. But where we ended up finding an affordable and a great fit for a location was Tiny, these little gas stations. But it was big enough for a coffee operation. And so from day one, we did coffee, and we partnered with local roasters to help learn the coffee business. And then Kathy and I, we also, our third kind of partner in running this is a woman who was running one of the local coffee roasteries, who was ready to move on to a next thing. And we've partnered with Rue's Roast, that coffee roastery, ever since. But Laura's been with us as our general manager ever since.
That's amazing. It's so cool. It's so cool that you really are walking the walk of local and building community and creating wealth, right? Within the community as well. I'm sort of thinking about other businesses that I will leave unnamed, but that talk about supporting small businesses, talk about being a part of the community, but then they bring in, La Colombe coffee into their coffee shop. And it's like, I think you're missing an opportunity here to truly build community and to lift up the roasters in your, in your neighborhood and in your region. So I think it's just very, commendable and what you're doing. And also it's, I think, proving to people. And one of the primary reasons we wanted to have you on the show is to say, this is an example of that it can work, where you've got a good idea in a place where people want what you're offering, in a model that you understand that works, that is full of transparency for the shopper, for the farmer. And even as you're sort of renegotiating, if you will, the revenue share, there's a lot of transparency there as well. And there's no twinge of, oh, we're gonna, corner the coffee market, or we're gonna take away from the farmer's market and be this big thing. It's in conjunction with and in support of, and it's working, which is amazing.
Yeah, it feels really good. There's a real mutual trust concept that, we needed to trust the farms that they were going to be delivering, they could be reliable, that we could work with them. And they need to trust us, which actually took us to open and demonstrate it before it actually really happened. that we
Yeah.
were going to be able to represent and sell their products with the same enthusiasm that they do at the farmers market. And it requires also a kind of a real interest in this area, a passion for the logistics, because now
Yeah.
any week we have 100 farms delivering to the store. We talk to, we have a day of the week where each farm has their day where we reach out to them and we communicate about what they should bring in. And even though they own it or set the prices, they really look to us to direct,
Yeah.
they bring 3 cases, 5 cases, or 10 cases of something. And and they know the risk. Like we tell them it's, what we think they
Yeah.
should bring in. And so we really don't, there's very little food waste in this system. The food is so fresh that like for a head of lettuce, it normally lasts 15 days. And when
Yeah.
you pick a lettuce in a traditional grocery store, it's already on day 8 or 9 or 10 when you get it. And so, if you do go away for the weekend, it's likely to be turning the corner within a few days. And our lettuce, for an example, is just, it's brought that day or the day before. It's going to be great in our refrigerator or yours,
Yeah.
for another 10 days plus. And so we have just many people that, comment like, wow, I went away for a week and I came back and it was still fine, or whatever the case is. So I just think there's much less waste, and the revenue has been consistent for the farms.
Yeah. And one of my questions was going to be like, what was that journey or process of proving that the model could work? But I think we've sort of answered that question. It's that communication and, certain level of trust in the
Yeah.
beginning. That's like a wariness. I like that you're honest about that. I remember when we were doing our research for our food business, one farmer in particular was just like, you're crazy. You're just absolutely crazy. And he was right in the long run, um but I totally get that mentality of like little trust in like sort of new ideas and new ways to do things. But I'm glad that it worked out for you guys. You have a second location. When did you open that second location, and what sort of went into that decision to expand to another
Hmm.
spot?
Sure. So we were off and running pretty good. We had kind of done projections for the first store, and we thought, it would take, 12 or 18 months to kind of get to like a healthier cash flow, like a break even situation. But we were able to do that really quickly. There was just strong interest from the get go from farmers sending customers there. So the first store was operating pretty well. And what we realized that there's like the solid reason is just that we thought, the mission is to grow the local food system. And if the farmers are kind of doubling, or tripling what they're bringing in now with just one stop besides the farmers market, like why not have one other stop that they could make? And,
Right.
again, just get a bigger truck or whatever and bring more in. So we just thought it'd be very synergistic as a way to grow the local food system really amongst the same farms, like to really solidify farm income for farms that are choosing to go into farming. They're not trying to get rich, but they definitely, they'd like to have health care, be able to take a vacation once
Mm-hmm.
in a while, or,
Yep.
not have to have a second job off the farm. So we thought economically it really fit with our mission. And then the other thing that happened was the same owner of our building worked with us in a location that we had been considering, that's right next to the neighborhood where we grew up and we raised our kids. So it was like this factor to bring the farm stop also to a distinct neighborhood where we knew it would be welcomed.
Mm.
And then we also kind of had, some of these things are personnel driven, where it was actually Laura and another of our managers, Brian, had both left to go explore like another career, and we had backfilled. And then, within a few months they came back and they said, that other business was not that great. We really miss
Mm.
being here. And, what can we do? And at that time, we didn't have any pathways, and these were two very capable, like local food managers. And so it just happened all at the same time. And it pushed us to say, let's do it. And
Yeah.
they agreed to really run the new location. And, it helped us, from a personal point of view, realize, yeah, we have more people that are really good and can help us have the bandwidth to have a second store. All those things taken together led us to open that second location in 2017.
Yeah.
So it's 3 years later.
You mentioned earlier that first location seemed like there were a lot of people that cooked that
Yes.
passed by, and that there were also, students in the neighborhood. Do you find students frequenting your store? Are you serving really the community at large, all kinds of demographics and socioeconomic?
Yeah. The second store is closer to the campus area, and so it has a lot of students. And the athletes at the University of Michigan
Mm.
in all sports have these little Fueling Blue cards that we accept at the store as a form of
Oh,
payment,
wow.
and they have stipends, so they're in all the time, and they like to eat healthy, and so that's one group. There's also like all of the kind of the faculty and grad student groups that really do a lot of cooking, and we're very close for them. The second location also is much larger, and it has room to host classes. And so we end up hosting classes at both locations, but the second one is really, there's an elementary school. So the little kids come over and learn about pawpaws and, and local food. And then, grad students, studying sustainability come and, also learn more about what we're up to. So it's very integrated across kind of different ages and
Yeah.
different groups.
That's awesome. One of the things we touched on in our news segment, previously, about Argus was that it wasn't all sunshine and roses, that when you're introducing something brand new that hasn't existed somewhere before, people may not understand it, the rules or sort of regulations around how people buy food and how food is supplied. There might be a little bit of an issue there. And I remember reading the story about the eggs
Oh yeah.
that were that has happened in some of the food businesses that I've been a part of too, where whole animals, because they didn't go through a USDA plant, but they came directly from a farm, are seized, and you have
Hmm.
this food that
Yes.
is going to waste. I mean, A, did it kill you, like that the eggs were gone, and B, if you could share, how did you overcome that? And were there any other
Yeah.
situations like this egg situation that
Sure.
happened?
Yeah. And so with the eggs, we envisioned ourselves as a farmer's market, and except we have like way good refrigeration and we're open all the time.
Right.
And so some of our farms that also have flocks, small flocks, said, "Can we sell our eggs there? We sell them on the farm. We sell them at the farmer's market." And we said, "Sure." Made sense. And we were selling them. And we were actually at our daughter's graduation, and we
Oh,
got a phone call from our manager, said, "The inspector's here and she's quarantined all the eggs." She said, "You can't sell eggs that have not been processed in a licensed facility." I'm like, "But they're the same eggs that farmer has on a card table in the sun at the farmer's
yeah.
market." So,
Yeah.
but, so we didn't really know all the answers. And I just said, put a sign on the refrigerator that just says, the Department of Ag has quarantined the eggs. And if you have question, this is their number, call them and ask them
Right.
what, because I didn't know. and,
Yeah.
and so it's like 2 days later, we got a call really like we have a lot of customers that preferred eggs that had been less processed,
Yeah.
so they don't get bleached, that like European customers, like eggs are not refrigerated in Europe. They're in the middle of the store because they leave the protective coating on eggs. And so it's just, we had a lot of customers that preferred them and preferred the farms. And so they were putting calls in. And so the inspectors, boss's boss said, you got to have these people stop calling. What can we do? and, and so we kind of and we also weirdly found that this issue went across the political aisle, because this was, trying to think of what year this was, in probably 2016 or something like that. I don't know. But
Mhm.
we had calls from the Democratic and Republican like senators in our state, saying, we've heard something's going on there, what's going on and how can we help? Like the people from the Ag Committee. And so it's very
Wow.
like there's a public support to make local food easier to buy as long as you can maintain food safety. And
Yeah.
so we convened a group of 6 egg farmers with also the Michigan State Product Center and some people from the Department of Ag. And we found the way to navigate state law and food safety. And they accepted a proposal that we made that let us host these sales as long as we kept these eggs in a separate refrigerator, and that we clearly labeled for customers that these were eggs that
Okay.
were not processed in a licensed facility. And also, back to our mission, state law forbids consignment sales or wholesale sales of non-licensed eggs. So we couldn't
Ah,
participate in the sale. We couldn't take our 30% or 20% consignment fee. So for the first year, we just hosted it. We had a cash envelope, and you could just buy from these farms and put the money in their envelope. And that got kind of hairy after a
yeah.
while. And so we realized that we could actually take payment at the register as long as we had a system to then refund that money to the farm. So economically, we don't participate. We host these sales. So we're working now to change the law in Michigan to help make it easier. There's like 5,000 farms in Michigan that could sell eggs, that are small farms, that right
Wow.
now they can put a cooler at the end of their driveway and hope people buy them. But, if there are easier ways to sell them. So we're working with our farmers market association and the state to make this possible to maybe have a way to sell these for others. But right now we're operating kind of under an exemption, with tight boundaries, but we've paid out, I don't know, it's like over $200,000 in egg sales to
Wow.
these little farms since we've been around. So
That's
it's a
awesome.
it's a bunch of money for these guys. They really need it. These farmers.
Yeah.
This is they have the great eggs, and it's so that was but that one had a good ending. It was kind of treacherous for a while, but it worked out well.
Yeah. Have you run into other situations, like similar situations with the farm stop?
I Yeah, I think we've moved to a very collaborative working role with the Michigan Department of Agriculture.
Mm,
So it's been helpful. We find that we're on the front line of new producers coming in that for the first time they're bottling honey or maple syrup, or they're making jam. We end up coaching them quite a bit on how to do proper labeling and proper licensing, and we connect them with the Michigan State Product Center.
that's great.
So just by the nature of, if you're in a big grocery store, Kroger's, you're not going to run across these first time producers, but
Yeah.
we live for them. I mean, we love working with these up and coming food producers. And so that's part of what we do. I think across the country also, we've kind of seen the difficulty in USDA meat processing. That's a
Ooh,
real
yes.
bottleneck, and all of the meat that we sell at Argus has to be processed in the USDA facility, and that's
Mhm.
how it's done. But those farmers have to drive like 2 or 3 hours with their animals, and they have to then come back and get them again, and it's expensive. And
Yeah.
it's one of the things that adds a lot of cost unnecessarily to local meat versus industrial meat.
Yeah.
So
So you guys are working to make some changes there, hopefully. I mean,
yeah, just encouraging. There's building customer demand for this, especially during COVID. We started selling a
yeah.
lot of eggs, a lot of meat, and people really like it. So we're starting to build the demand. And now
Yeah.
I think there's both there's two meat processing plans that are, in our geography that are looking to get funded and opened. And
That's great.
so
Yeah.
they're coming along, but that's another need.
Yeah, that's great. I was having a conversation the other day with someone about, where in the infrastructure is funding really needed? Do we need another shared kitchen, which is sort of like end of stream, if you will, right? Production, or do we need locations, processing plants, facilities so that farmers can bring their products and get them processed more locally, including, meat fabrication. I work with a ranch, and the distances that the animals have to travel and the expense. I mean, I this year got my like first really detailed view of how much you pay per pound, for an animal, and how that just multiplies due to all the processing costs and fees and transportation. So yeah, it's become very top of mind for me to question, how can we support more local meat processing, more local milling of flour, like all of these things where like I believe there is a demand, and there's also people who can create a very good product, but they are limited, right? You either have to be teeny tiny, because then you only need a little bit of supply of like flour, for example, or you have to be huge, because then you can go through the big processing plants and get, buy the pallets or train car loads of flour, that are required to kind of be at that level. So it's like, how do we support that middle phase, or that just the right size kind of operations for food producers and farmers?
Yeah, it's the like for poultry, I think the per bird processing in some of these facilities, is like $5 a bird or something. So you go, you put all the effort into perfectly raising,
Yeah.
these chickens, and then you bring them in and you pay that fee, and then you come back and the wholly roasted roasters at Costco are less expensive than you paid just to process this bird. And
Yeah.
it's a very different product is what we're what we found. It's a big difference when
Yeah.
you've got like humanely raised animals. But I think we've been able to kind of collect, I think, an amazing assortment across you know poultry and beef and pork and lamb, and also fish, living in the Great Lakes, keeping the local theme going. So we do not have, halibut, and, we don't have, if you're farm stop, in Washington State, go for it.
Mhm.
But we have wonderful fish like whitefish and walleye, that are fished out of the Great Lakes. And so, there's aspects what's nice about the farm stops is they really represent what's available in your region. And they're going to be very different if you go to
Yeah.
one in California versus Michigan or Ohio.
Yeah. On that note, I believe I read in the article that you're not really interested in having more farm stops yourself or like expanding into other states, but you are really contributing to the growth of farm stops, it seems, by education that you all are providing. Can you talk a little bit about that and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we started this really kind of as an experiment just to see. We were not entirely sure it was going to work,
Mm,
and it worked really well. And there started to be people that would come in and say, "Wow, this is really cool," just the same way we did back in
yeah.
Local Roots. And so we had lots of ad hoc discussions, and it was getting kind of inefficient. And so we started a kind of a 1 hour monthly, free webinar that we still have every month. You can sign up on our website. We go through the model and the impact and how it works, just to give people like an introduction to a different way to have a local food store. And then people that were saying, yeah, we're really interested. I think I got a building, I got a partner. Like how do you pay these farmers? Like, this is a really weird model. How do you communicate with all these farmers? And so we kind of graduated to do a 3-day class, which we do every other month, where we do go through and have our managers that run, the person doing the payouts to the farms explains how we collect the money from the point of sale system and how do we create reports and pay farmers. And there's a section on how much money does it cost to open one and how do you budget it. And so that's been going pretty well. And there's people that have come through there and gone on and opened one. And then that led to hosting a conference last year, because we really felt that there needed to be a way for people who are interested either in learning about it because they might want to do it, or
Mhm.
I'm running one of these things and I sure would love a peer group because I don't know how to do this, that, or another thing, or how do you guys do marketing? And then there's also just people interested in food systems that are just
Yeah.
curious, like, they could be policymakers or funders. And so we've morphed now. We've always been we're open source, like we share what we've learned the same way a Local Root shared with us. Now it's at least, 3 offerings that are kind of available for people that are
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah. I think the fact that you've got policymakers and, representatives of the USDA is so huge because it's giving them an opportunity to see how the business works and what I think the potential is and how they can support, whether it's with grants or funding or a change in law or policy, or, how can they facilitate this very desired business model and support small farms. I mean, we talk a lot about the statistics of how farms are changing, right? Like the literal landscape of the number of small farms that are closing and how much land large farms are now taking up. This is just coming to my mind. Did I read correctly that actually in Michigan, the number of small farms has grown?
So so we look at impact in different ways. So one is how much
Yeah.
we're paying farms. And so,
Uh-huh.
how much we like, that's an impact. And last year, I think we averaged with most of the farms, they were paid out over 35,000 each. So these are amounts of money that make a difference for these farms. But we also got the ag census data back, which tracks the number of farms that it was a downward trend up through 2012. It was starting to turn in 2017. And by 2022, our county had reversed the trend completely. And we had, I think, 59 new farms open,
Wow.
starting to sell vegetables. And my wife was just meeting with someone today, a farmer that said they moved to Ann Arbor because of the ability to sell, like they thought they could sell and have better economics because of a farm stop. And so it does make a difference. But it's
Bill, I
not just
have
Argus. I'd
chills.
say it's not just our store. It's a little bit of change in the ethos of the town, because the farmers market, people walk into our store and we teach them about local food, but we say you can also meet the farmer at the farmers market. And
Yeah.
then they go into restaurants and they're like, well, what local farms do you have? Whose eggs are you selling? And it's like, you start to just slowly raise the demand and the expectation that, when you can produce it locally, it's a great thing to have. So
Yeah. Yeah. The not just sense of community, but the actual community that you are creating, the synergy. Like, I cannot wait to come visit Ann Arbor, Michigan. I didn't previously have any plans to do that, but now how could I not come and see?
come on. Yeah.
Um, it's what I aspire to inspire through conversations like this, through, the work that we do at the Good Food CFO, which is financially focused. How can you create the unique business model that's right for your business, where you are, what you're producing, to succeed and to in its own way have an impact on the local community, and spur similar things to what Argus is doing in Ann Arbor. So thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for inspiring other people to start farm stops. And I'm sure the listeners here of the Good Food CFO podcast to go, you know what? I might be little now. This might be sort of a seedling of an idea, but as part of a community, like, really big, powerful things can happen and be the result of our work. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, no, thank you for telling the stories and communicating all the great things that you are, working to share with your listeners.
Yeah. So before we go, where can people learn more about Argus, maybe learn more about your education and conferences? Where can they find you?
So our website has quite a bit of information. It also has lots of pictures, so you can get a sense of what these things look like. They're not big, but they're powerful. It doesn't take a lot of square footage. But www.argusfarmstop, and it's Argus, ARGUS, kind of like the old cameras.com, argusfarmstop.com, which is all one word. So that's one great source. And then for this conference, so we've just scheduled the next conference for March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Ann Arbor. And I'll say last year it was similar days, and it was weather that we wore short sleeves to. It was beautiful. And so that has a separate website that has information about the conference and the content and what's going to be happening there. And that is www.farmstops.net. And so that one's really meant to be, more representative of the group of people working on this around the country rather than like Argus per se.
Yeah, great. And we'll put the links to both of those sites in our show notes. So if you're listening, driving, walking, working, whatever you're doing while you're taking in this podcast, those links will be there for you in the show notes, and then also on our website on the podcast page. Bill, before we go, is there anything else you want to share?
No, I think it's a time where you kind of need to think globally, but try to take some action locally. And I think the pendulum has really just swung too far in the direction of industrial agriculture, and needs to swing back to support more local food systems. And so it really, there's a need for innovation. I think the Farm Stop is one idea, but I think there's lots of other innovation that can be done to help grow local food systems. And hope everyone keeps on with the journey to do some work here.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for your time, Bill. This was an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Looking for more content like this? Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll see weekly podcast episodes as well as other content related to the show. Just visit youtube.com/@thegoodfoodcfo.
Thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help good food founders find the show. We'll be back with a brand new episode next week.